Like, Rings of Power doesn't even take Rings of Power seriously. And this is total spoilers right off the bat. Like, the whole interaction between Isildur and the young kid that stabs him, it's easily one of the worst points of writing in this season up until now. It's just atrocious. Like, she says to him at one point, like, it doesn't hurt, does it? Or they're arguing about her having stabbed him. It just makes no sense. So the episode had some strong moments, but once again, it feels like the show just isn't taking itself seriously. Let's break down what worked, what didn't, the key issues that are holding the series back. Stick around because we've got a lot to unpack. So let's start with some positives. Episode 3 opens up strong, probably the best episode so far when it comes to acting. We've got some of the series' best actors, like the gentleman who plays Elendil, superb actor. Then we have Isildur, played by Maxim Baldry, who also does a solid performance. And then the actor who plays Farazone really shines as well. Even though, to be quite honest, they're continuing sort of this populist take on Numenor with Farazone, which is totally not in line with Tolkien whatsoever. But here's the thing, the pace is still painfully slow. By the second season, this is a big problem. The slow pacing might have worked early on, but at this stage, it just doesn't hold up. We need more momentum to keep the story engaging. What's up with the dwarf storyline? It doesn't really make sense. Aren't the dwarves like a rich race? They've got access to mines and minerals, right? But somehow or other, their story seems underdeveloped. All of a sudden, Prince Durin is poor because he's not speaking to his father? Does that really make sense? Why does that make sense to people? I don't understand. Speaking of flat, let's talk about the character arcs, especially Theo and Arondir. Theo's anger is projected onto Arondir, and there's this whole conversation in the new season about, you're not my father and you don't know what it's like. This doesn't make sense when you consider Arondir's role and the history between them just from season 1, let alone the fact that if we really push even deeper, of course, both of these characters exist only in Rings of Power. And then Theo overhearing Isildur talk about being responsible for his mother's death is supposed to create a connection between them, but it feels forced. We know Bronwyn's death is really because the actress left the show, so the emotional weight just isn't there. And then there's the whole thing of Isildur and Estrid. She stabs him, and within a couple scenes, they're suddenly best friends. That's not good character development. There's no arc, no real conflict resolution. And then, of course, we can see that they're easily headed towards being lovers, which, once again, just where does it come from? If I were to rewrite that scene, I'd have Isildur remain angry for a while, maybe even referencing the stabbing in future interactions. That would have felt more natural and given their relationship more depth in the long run. I think an added thing is if they wanted Isildur to be stabbed, they should have probably slowed down the pacing a little bit in that section and maybe extended that whole interaction with his stabbing at least a couple beats. That pacing should have been slow. So now let's address some of the bigger issues with how the lore is handled. The way Farazone takes power in Numenor, it's just all wrong. You know it's wrong. I know it's wrong. The Eagles show up, but it's still just not right. Sure, the concept of Farazone leading to Numenor's downfall is in the lore, but the execution here feels off. And turning Farazone into a sort of populist leader with a modern political twist akin to Trump, it's just inappropriate for a show based on Tolkien's work. It feels like they're trying too hard to mirror the 21st century, which clashes with the fantasy setting. Another big issue is how the orcs are portrayed in this episode. We got an orc complaining to Adar about not wanting to go to war, and then there's this whole scene with that same orc and his wife and baby. This attempt to try to humanize them, This concept at the core really has nothing to do with Tolkien's original premise for the orcs. And it feels like a weird attempt to make the orcs more relatable, which just doesn't work. And the main reason that I'm saying this is that there's always this continued effort in Rings of Power to humanize bad people, to make bad stuff look good. It's pretty much like the upside down world of Stranger Things. And then there's Arian's relationship, or Arian's, and then there's Arian's relationship with Farazan's son, which doesn't make any sense. She's part of the faithful by blood, yet she's buddy-buddy with the guy who's essentially leading a coup. This kind of political maneuvering feels out of place in Tolkien's world as it is actually created. It's like they're trying to insert modern democratic values into a fantasy monarchy, which doesn't fit and doesn't make any sense. There were so many missed opportunities for better storytelling in this episode. For example, the interaction between Theo and Arondir after the funeral could have been much more powerful. Imagine if Theo had said something like, "It's my fault she's dead," and Arondir responded with, "No, the orcs killed her." That kind of exchange would have added depth to their relationship rather than just having Theo lash out in anger. And what if instead of Farazan giving a speech to the crowd, he had a more intimate conversation with his advisor, laying out his plan to get closer to his cousin? This would align more with the lore and give us a deeper look into the character's motivations. And finally, ultimately, the biggest issue with episode 3 is that most of the characters have flat arcs. There's very little development from season 1 to season 2. While there are moments of emotional depth, like Arondir's reaction to Bronwyn's death, these moments are too few and far between. Characters like Galadriel and Sauron feel one-dimensional, and even when there's potential for growth, the show just doesn't capitalize on it. And don't even get me started on how they're handling Arondir. They've essentially turned him into a stereotype acting like a Vulcan with no real range of emotions. Elves aren't Vulcans. They have emotions, wisdom, and complexity. But here they've reduced Arondir to a flat robotic character, which is a real disservice to the role he could play. So that's my take on the episode 3 of Rings of Power. There are definitely some strong points, but the pacing, character arcs, and lore execution just aren't where they need to be. What do you think? Am I being too harsh, or are these issues bothering you too? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into your favorite shows. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you when I see you.